Today we're going to look at another one of my favorite guns. We're going to look at a Ruger Blackhawk, or what some call the old model, or 3-screw single action revolver. And we're going to look at the new model Blackhawk, and we'll see the difference between those two. Here we have my old model, or Ruger Blackhawk, or 3-screw. You see the 3 screws on the side. It's a 6.5-inch barrel. I put the white grips on myself. This is my Ruger old model. And then my new model is a Ruger new model Blackhawk, 4 5/8-inch barrel. I put a Bisley hammer on it. I installed the white grips myself. This also has a steel ejector rod housing and a steel grip frame. This is a heavy revolver, but that soaks up all the recoil. Let's go take a look at the differences between the two. First, let's take a look at the Ruger Blackhawk. This is .357 Magnum caliber, but this is the original. This is the old style, or the 3-screw. If you look between that end of that cylinder and the end of the frame, you can see the firing pin. As I pull the hammer back, you see that firing pin retreat back into the frame. It's a frame-mounted firing pin. My first notch is what's called the safety notch. All right. The second notch, that's my half cock. That frees the cylinder up. That's for loading. If I go to a full cock, now it's ready to fire. Let's go back to that first notch. Right now, if I had a round in the chamber and I was to strike the end of this hammer very hard, I'd probably break that safety notch off the hammer, and the hammer would go forward and the round would fire. So to prevent that, Ruger came up with a safety. It's called a transfer bar safety. Now, if you see the hammer's down and there is no firing pin sticking through, you look through there, there's no firing pin sticking out. Okay, as we cock this back, you'll see that this transfer bar come up. And now, by holding the trigger back, that transfer bar will say, and that transfers that hammer blow to that frame-mounted firing pin. And now, and only now, do I get that firing pin coming through it. If I let go of the trigger, that firing pin goes back into the frame again, because that transfer bar would go down. So I can only get this gun to fire by holding that transfer bar, by holding the trigger in. Then it's going to transfer, and then it's going to fire. You'll see the firing pin go forward. What was eliminated is you no longer have the safety notch. You don't need it. You no longer have a half cock. You don't need it. This gun is opened, or you can open and load and change when you open up the loading gate. Let's go back to that old model. Now with the hammer down, I open the loading gate. Nothing. I have to go back to that half cock. Now I can load it. Full cock, lower the hammer down to that safety notch. So kind of a little scary when you're putting the hammer down. You may have a live round in there. Depending on that safety notch, there's not a whole lot of safety there. But you can see why Ruger went ahead and improved it and made the new model Blackhawk. This now the new model. You can see it right there written on the frame. That's the new model Blackhawk. And there's no longer 3 screws. It's now 2 pins. You got a trigger pin and a hammer pin. And that's the difference between the new model and what's called the 3-screw, or the old model. The two Ruger Blackhawks, we have the old model, or Ruger Blackhawk, we have the new model Blackhawk. If you're looking for safety features, you cannot beat that new model, that transfer bar safety. It's like indestructible. You're not going to get a misfire. There's no scariness of putting a hammer down on a live round or a full cylinder. With the older one, you do have to carry 5 rounds if you want to be safe. You try to keep the hammer down on an empty cylinder, so it basically becomes a 5-shooter. With that being said, like I said, you cannot beat the new safety features. It makes it a true 6-shooter. The old model, like I said, is going to be a 5-shooter. But as much work as I've done on that new model, I put the new hammer in, I fitted that to the gun. I've done a lot of work to smooth it up. I've did a lot of stone work inside there, and I cannot get that trigger pull as smooth and as light as the old model. Just the effort of pulling that trigger, and as I pull the trigger to drop the hammer, I'm also keeping that transfer bar up. So there's just a little bit heavier trigger with the new model. The old models has a little bit lighter trigger pull, maybe a little bit more accurate because of that. But if you like the feel of that old style, which is the old model, honestly, I think it shoots a little bit better. It just feels a little bit better. It's obviously a lot more like the Colt, but it just has a nicer trigger. It's not as safe. You don't feel as comfortable carrying it around loaded, but it does shoot a little bit better.